There comes a moment in every person's life when the noise of the world grows louder than the voice within. People will tell you who you are before you even discover yourself. They will measure your dreams with their fears, weigh your future with their doubts, and hand you limitations wrapped in the disguise of advice. Some will laugh when you speak boldly. Some will step away when you dare to rise higher than the version of you they once knew. But hear this clearly. Your destiny was never created to fit inside the small opinions of frightened minds. You were born with a fire that cannot be defined by rejection, silence, or criticism. And the moment you stop asking the world for permission to become who you were meant to be, you begin to walk into a future greater than anything there of others. You will slowly disappear beneath their expectations. You will silence your own voice just to avoid judgment. You will hide your gifts to keep insecure people comfortable. And one day, you may wake up realizing you spent years becoming acceptable instead of becoming authentic. There is no deeper exhaustion than pretending to be less than who you truly are. The truth is, people change their opinions every day. The same crowd that doubts you now may celebrate you later. The same voices that once laughed may someday say they always believed in you. Human opinions are temporary, emotional, and uncertain. But your purpose is not temporary. The dream living inside you did not arrive by accident. It came with responsibility. It came with sacrifice. And it came with the understanding that not everyone will understand your journey while you are walking through it. You must learn how to move forward even when applause is absent. There is strength in continuing without validation. There is power in believing in your vision before the evidence appears. Every person who changed their life had to face moments where nobody understood their path, yet they kept walking, they kept building, they kept trusting that what they carried inside mattered more than the fears surrounding them. Do not ask the world for permission to grow beyond the version of yourself they became comfortable with. Some people will resist your transformation because your courage reminds them of the risks they never took. But your life was never meant to be controlled by the fears of others. You are not here to shrink yourself so everyone else feels secure. You are here to become fully alive, fully fearless, and fully committed to the purpose written upon your soul. And one day, when you look back at the life you created, you will be grateful you did not surrender your future to opinions that were never powerful enough to define you in the first place. There is a freedom that enters your life the day you stop performing for approval. Until that moment, many people spend their years chasing applause like it is proof of their worth. They shape their words to satisfy others. They hide parts of themselves to avoid criticism. They live carefully, not because they are weak, but because they are afraid of rejection, and little by little they become strangers to their own spirit. The tragedy is not always loud. Sometimes it happens quietly in the moments when a person abandons their truth just to keep the room comfortable. The world teaches people very early to seek validation. Applause feels rewarding, praise feels safe, acceptance feels necessary. But when your happiness depends entirely on the approval of others, your peace becomes fragile. One harsh opinion can shake your confidence. One moment of rejection can make you question your path. You begin living like an actor on a stage, constantly adjusting yourself for an audience that changes every day. And no matter how hard you try, there will always be someone who disapproves, someone who misunderstands, someone who refuses to see your value. The powerful thing about maturity is realizing that not every meaningful decision will be understood by the crowd. Sometimes the choices that transform your life are the very choices people criticize at first. Leaving what no longer serves you may look foolish to others. Believing in a dream no one can yet see may appear unrealistic. Choosing peace over popularity may confuse people who are addicted to attention. But growth often requires disappointing the expectations that once controlled you. There comes a moment when you must ask yourself an honest question. Are you building a life that feels true to your soul, Or are you building a life designed to keep others comfortable? Because those are not always the same thing. Many people become exhausted because they are carrying the weight of everyone else's opinions while ignoring the voice within themselves. They smile while feeling empty. They succeed in the eyes of others while silently losing connection with who they really are. The day you stop living for applause is the day you begin to hear your own voice clearly again. You stop measuring your worth by how loudly people cheer for you. You stop shrinking your dreams to fit inside the expectations of fearful minds. You stop apologizing for wanting more from life. And something beautiful happens when you no longer need constant validation. You become fearless in a different way. You move with peace instead of performance. You choose purpose over popularity. You learn that silence from others does not mean failure, and criticism does not mean you are on the wrong path. Not everyone will celebrate your transformation. Some people only support the version of you that made them feel comfortable. But your life cannot become a prison built from other people's expectations. You were not created to spend your years chasing approval from people who are still searching for their own identity. Your purpose is far too valuable to be traded for temporary applause. And when you finally release the need to be accepted by everyone, you discover something greater than applause. You discover self-respect. You discover inner peace. You discover the quiet strength of becoming fully yourself, even when the world is still learning how to understand you. So many people give temporary voices permanent power over their lives. A few careless words spoken in a moment of doubt can stay inside someone's mind for years. A teacher says they are not talented enough. A friend laughs at their dream. A stranger questions their ability. And suddenly, those opinions begin to grow louder than their own belief. It is heartbreaking how often people abandon a future filled with possibility because they listen too closely to people who never truly understood them. But opinions are unstable things. They change with emotions, circumstances, and time. The same person who criticizes you today may admire you tomorrow. The same crowd that ignores your effort now may one day celebrate your success as if they always supported you. Human judgment is uncertain because most people speak from limited vision. They only see where you are standing now, not where your determination could take you. They judge your beginning while being completely blind to your potential. Your purpose, however, is not built on changing emotions. It does not disappear because someone failed to recognize your value. Purpose remains even in seasons of rejection. It remains when doors close, when people misunderstand you, and when progress feels slow. There is something sacred about the dreams that continue calling you, even after disappointment tries to silence them. That persistence inside your spirit is not accidental. It is a reminder that your life carries meaning greater than public opinion. Too many people confuse criticism with truth. They hear negativity often enough that they begin believing it must be reality. But just because someone speaks with confidence does not mean they speak with wisdom. Some people project their fears onto others without even realizing it. A person afraid to fail may discourage your ambition. A person who settled for less may resent your courage to want more. Their words may sound convincing, but they are often reflections of their own limitations, not yours. If you allow every opinion to control your direction, your life will constantly drift according to the expectations of others. One person will tell you to play it safe, another will tell you not to dream too big. Someone else will insist you are changing too much. And while you are trying to satisfy everyone, you slowly lose connection with yourself. A person who follows every opinion eventually forgets their own voice. There is strength in remembering that your purpose existed before anyone formed an opinion about you. Before criticism found you, there was already something meaningful placed inside your heart. Before anyone doubted your abilities, there was already potential living within you. The opinions came later. That means they do not have the authority to define what was already created with intention. You must learn to treat opinions like passing weather, not permanent direction. Some days the world will praise you, other days it will misunderstand you completely. Neither moment should control your identity. Applause can become just as dangerous as criticism if you depend on it too heavily. Real strength comes from staying connected to your purpose whether people approve of you or not. And one day you will understand that the people who changed the world were not the ones who followed popular opinion. They were the ones who stayed faithful to their vision long enough for the world to finally catch up. Fear of judgment has a quiet way of entering a person's life. It rarely arrives like a storm. Instead, it moves softly, almost unnoticed, until it begins shaping decisions, silencing voices, and limiting possibilities. A dream is not always destroyed by failure. Sometimes it is destroyed before it ever has the chance to breathe. A person hides their talent because they are afraid people will laugh. They remain silent because they fear criticism. They settle for a smaller life because the thought of being judged feels heavier than the pain of regret. And over time, they convince themselves they are being realistic, when in truth they are simply afraid. So many brilliant people live beneath their potential because they spend too much energy imagining what others might think. They rehearse conversations in their mind before speaking. They hesitate before taking opportunities. They delay their goals until the perfect moment arrives. But often, the perfect moment never comes because fear keeps whispering that they are not ready yet. Fear says they will embarrass themselves. Fear says people will not support them. Fear says they should stay where it is safe. And while fear is speaking, life continues moving forward without waiting. The painful thing about fear of judgment is that most people do not even realize how much it controls them. They believe they are making practical choices, but deep inside, they are simply trying to avoid discomfort. They choose security over purpose, silence over expression, approval over authenticity. They become experts at surviving while secretly longing to feel alive. But survival alone can never satisfy the human spirit. There is something inside every person that desires freedom, meaning, and growth. And that part suffers whenever fear becomes the ruler of their decisions. The truth is, people will judge no matter what you do. If you dream big, some will call you unrealistic. If you stay small, others will say you lacked courage. If you speak boldly, someone will criticize your confidence. If you remain quiet, someone will overlook your value. You cannot escape opinions by shrinking yourself. All you do is lose pieces of your identity trying to satisfy people who were never fully satisfied to begin with. Many people who appear fearless are not free from fear at all. They simply decided their dreams mattered more than the opinions surrounding them. Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is choosing to move forward even while fear is standing beside you. It is understanding that judgment may come, but refusing to let it become a prison. Every meaningful life requires moments where you must risk being misunderstood in order to remain true to yourself. One of the greatest tragedies in life is reaching the end of your journey carrying dreams that were never given a chance. Dreams buried beneath self-doubt, gifts hidden because of insecurity, words left unspoken because of imagined criticism. The weight of unfulfilled potential can become heavier than failure itself. You were not created to spend your entire life hiding from judgment. Your voice matters too much. Your purpose matters too much. The world does not need another person pretending to be smaller than they truly are. It needs people brave enough to rise beyond fear, speak with honesty, and pursue the calling placed upon their soul, even when the crowd does not yet understand the journey. There are moments in life when people begin to live as if they were placed inside invisible boundaries drawn by others. These boundaries are not physical, yet they feel real because they are reinforced through repetition. Someone once said, "You are not capable," And that sentence stayed longer than it should have. Another person suggested, "That is not for people like you." And slowly, without realizing it, a person begins to shrink their expectations. They start measuring their dreams not by possibility, but by permission. And in doing so, they forget a simple truth that existed long before any opinion was ever spoken over them. You were never meant to be confined by the limits someone else imagines for their own life. People often project their own fears onto others, not because they know your potential, but because they cannot see beyond their own experience. A person who has never stepped outside comfort will often believe comfort is the safest place for everyone. A person who has given up on their dreams may try to convince you that dreaming is unnecessary, but their limitations are not instructions for your life. They are reflections of where they stopped growing, not where you are destined to remain. It is easy, without awareness, to begin building your identity around the expectations of others. Approval can feel like safety. Acceptance can feel like belonging. But when belonging requires you to become less than who you are, it slowly turns into confinement. You begin to adjust your personality to avoid criticism. You silence your ideas to avoid disagreement. You reduce your ambition so no one feels uncomfortable around your growth. And in that process, the version of you that was meant to expand becomes trapped inside someone else's narrow understanding of what is possible. There is a quiet pressure in the world to stay within familiar lines, to choose what is predictable, to follow paths that are already accepted. But every meaningful change in history began with someone who stepped outside those limits, someone who refused to believe that their identity had to match the expectations placed upon them. Someone who understood that growth often requires disagreement with the world around you. And while those individuals were often misunderstood at first, they were not wrong for thinking differently. They were simply early in seeing what others had not yet learned to recognize. When you stop accepting other people's limits as your own, something powerful begins to shift inside you. You start questioning the beliefs that once felt absolute. You begin to realize that many of the boundaries you accepted were never locked doors, only assumptions you never challenged. You understand that your capacity is not determined by outside opinions, but by your willingness to explore what lies beyond them. And with that realization, hesitation begins to lose its authority over your life. There will always be voices trying to define what you can or cannot become, but those voices do not hold creative power over your future. They cannot see the full depth of what you carry. They only interpret you through the lens of their own limitations. And if you allow that narrow vision to define you, you will spend your life living inside a version of yourself that was never complete. You were not created to fit inside the boundaries of someone else's imagination. You were created with depth that cannot be measured by outside opinions, with potential that cannot be contained by inherited doubt, and with a future that expands far beyond what anyone else can fully predict. There is a strange kind of silence that follows self-doubt, a silence that does not come from the world around you, but from within you. It begins when external voices become so loud that your own belief starts to fade into the background. At first, it feels harmless to question yourself. You think you are being realistic, careful, responsible. But slowly, that questioning turns into hesitation, and hesitation turns into silence. And in that silence, your dreams begin to feel distant, as if they belong to someone else's life rather than your own. Yet there is a moment, often quiet and uncelebrated, when a person chooses to believe in themselves even when no one else does. It is not a loud decision. There is no audience, no applause, no validation waiting at the end. It is simply a turning inward, a small but powerful refusal to abandon what still feels true inside the heart. In that moment, something begins to shift, not in the world, but within the person. They stop waiting for permission to exist fully. They stop searching for proof that they are enough, and they begin, even if slowly, to stand on the fragile but growing foundation of their own belief. Believing in yourself when others do not is not an easy path. It often feels like walking against a current that never stops pushing back. There will be days when doubt feels louder than determination, when progress is invisible, and when silence from others feels like rejection. But what many do not realize is that silence is not always absence. Sometimes it is simply the space where growth is happening unseen. The roots of a strong life do not grow above the ground first. They grow deep, hidden, and patient, long before anything becomes visible. People may not understand what you are building in the beginning. They may not see your effort, your intention, or your vision, and because they cannot see it, they may question it. But lack of understanding does not equal lack of value. Many things that are meaningful in life are not immediately recognized. They are felt before they are proven. They are believed before they are accepted. And often they are questioned most at the very moment they are closest to becoming real. There is a quiet strength that develops when you learn to trust your own direction. You begin to rely less on external approval and more on internal clarity. You stop adjusting your path every time someone expresses doubt. You understand that every person carries a different level of vision, shaped by their own experiences, fears, and limitations. And while their perspective may reflect their truth, it does not have to become yours. Self-belief does not mean ignoring reality. It means refusing to let temporary circumstances define permanent identity. It means continuing forward, even when certainty is not guaranteed. It means holding on to something within yourself that is not dependent on outside agreement. And over time, that inner belief begins to shape your actions, your choices, and eventually your reality. One day, the same belief that once stood alone begins to gather evidence. Progress starts to appear, clarity begins to form, and people who once doubted start to notice what you could see all along. But by then, something has already changed within you. You are no longer waiting to be believed in. You have already learned how to believe in yourself, even when it was the hardest thing to do. There is something quietly revealing about criticism. On the surface, it appears directed outward, as if it belongs entirely to the person receiving it. But if you listen closely enough, you begin to notice that much of what people say about others is shaped by what they have not yet resolved within themselves. Criticism is often less about the one being judged and more about the one doing the judging. It becomes a mirror, reflecting fears that are rarely spoken aloud. People tend to criticize what they do not understand. When they encounter something that challenges their familiar way of thinking, discomfort arises. Instead of sitting with that discomfort, they often turn it into judgment. It feels easier to question another person's choices than to examine the limitations of their own perspective. In this way, criticism becomes a form of protection, a way to distance themselves from anything that forces them to grow or reconsider what they believe to be safe. Fear plays a subtle but powerful role in this process. When someone sees another person stepping into unfamiliar territory, taking risks, expressing authenticity, or pursuing a path that breaks convention, it can quietly awaken their own suppressed desires. And instead of acknowledging that inner stirring, they may respond with doubt or negativity. It is not always intentional. Many times it is automatic, a defense mechanism against the uncomfortable truth that they, too, once wanted more than what they settled for. There is also a kind of fear that comes from comparison. When someone witnesses another person attempting something bold, it can unintentionally highlight their own hesitation. Rather than confronting that hesitation, they may try to diminish what they see in front of them. If they can convince themselves that the dream is unrealistic, then they do not have to face the question of why they never pursued it themselves. Criticism, in this sense, becomes a way to preserve internal comfort at the cost of external honesty. But what is often forgotten is that fear does not disappear when it is projected onto others. It only changes direction for a moment. The very thing someone criticizes in another may be the same thing they quietly long for in themselves. Courage, visibility, change, ambition, these qualities can both inspire and intimidate. And when they intimidate, they are sometimes met not with reflection, but with resistance. Understanding this does not mean excusing harshness, but it does bring clarity. It allows you to see that not every opinion carries equal weight. Some words come from insight, and others come from unspoken insecurity. When you begin to recognize the difference, criticism loses its ability to define you. It becomes something you observe rather than absorb. There is freedom in realizing that you are not responsible for healing other people's fears by shrinking your life. If someone is uncomfortable with your growth, that discomfort belongs to them, not to you. Your responsibility is not to reduce your light so others feel less exposed. Your responsibility is to remain honest with the direction your life is calling you toward. And over time, something often changes in the very people who once criticized what they feared. As they grow, as they reflect, as they face their own hesitation, they begin to see differently. What once looked impossible starts to look familiar. What once felt threatening starts to feel understandable. And what once was criticized may eventually be respected. But even if that change never comes, your path does not depend on it. Because the moment you stop allowing other people's fears to define your direction, you step into a kind of clarity that no opinion can take away. There are moments in life when rejection feels like a closed door that was never meant to open again. It arrives without warning, sometimes through words, sometimes through silence, and sometimes through opportunities that simply do not return. In those moments, it is easy to believe that rejection is a final statement about your worth. But rejection is rarely that absolute. More often, it is a redirection, a pause that asks you to look deeper into who you are becoming rather than who you were trying to be in that moment. At first, rejection can feel personal. It touches pride, expectation, and hope all at once. You may replay it in your mind, searching for what went wrong, what could have been different, what you should have said or done. And while reflection has its place, there is a point where overthinking begins to turn into self-blame. That is where many people stop. They take rejection as confirmation that their effort was not enough, their dream was too large, or their timing was wrong. But rejection does not measure your entire potential. It only measures one moment in a much larger story. If you look closely at the lives of those who eventually achieved something meaningful, you will find rejection sitting quietly in their early chapters, not as a sign of failure, but as a companion to growth. It is often in the space of being turned away that people begin to refine their vision, strengthen their discipline, and discover parts of themselves they had not yet needed to use. What feels like an ending is often the beginning of resilience forming in silence. There is a hidden strength that emerges when you refuse to let rejection define your direction. Instead of stopping, you start adjusting. Instead of shrinking, you start refining. Instead of asking why it did not work, you begin asking what it is teaching you. This shift is not immediate. It takes time for pain to turn into perspective, but when it does, rejection no longer feels like a wall. It becomes a stepping stone that forces you to rise higher than where you were before. Many people fear rejection so deeply that they avoid trying altogether, but avoiding rejection also means avoiding possibility. It means staying in a space where nothing is risked, but nothing is truly gained either. There is a quiet cost to playing safe for too long. A life without rejection may appear stable, but it is often a life untouched by expansion. Growth requires exposure, and exposure always carries the chance of being turned away. What separates those who grow from those who remain stuck is not the absence of rejection, but the response to it. Some allow it to close their story prematurely. Others allow it to strengthen their direction. They learn, they adapt, and they return with a deeper understanding of what they are building. In that return, something shifts. Confidence is no longer fragile because it is no longer dependent on constant acceptance. It is rooted in experience. Rejection also has a way of filtering intention. It reveals whether a dream is being pursued casually or with true commitment. When something matters deeply, rejection does not erase it. It intensifies the determination to try again, to improve, to persist. And that persistence over time becomes the foundation of mastery. There will always be moments when you are not chosen, not accepted, or not understood. But those moments do not define the final shape of your journey. They are simply part of the process that refines it. And when you learn to stand again after rejection, not with bitterness, but with clarity, you begin to realize something important. What once felt like a setback was quietly preparing you for a strength you had not yet met within yourself.